Thanks for coming today, Danny. Today we are hosting another episode of the Outsider Gaming podcast, which is, a podcast style interview series that we're doing just about the gaming industry and trying to get our kind of a community building piece for us to relate to the everyday gamer who visits Outsider Gaming. Most of the time, people come to our website to hear about game guides. The latest on, sports games are huge for our website, but all sorts of console games, classic titles, as well as the latest and greatest type games. So I appreciate you coming, and I'll let you take it away. If you could give us a little bit about who you are, what you do, some of the stuff you're working on right now, and get started like that.
Yeah, sweet. Well, first off, Ryan, thanks for having me. So just a little bit of background. I've been a lifelong gamer. I think I've played just about every genre, and I did the math. I'm over 10,000 hours totally logged between my Xbox, Steam, and some mobile games. So when I say you built an expert in gaming, it really is as a gamer first. But professionally as well. So today I'm a venture capitalist at Decasonic. We're a Web3 venture fund. And a lot of what I focus on is gaming and how blockchain is really creating a new generation of Web3 gaming. So we focus deeply on kind of this idea of player ownership, interoperability, and creating kind of like that next gen set of tools. But we also invest in different types of gaming, kind of the traditional mobile casual to hardcore. My background before that was in management science and engineering, engineer by trade, an entrepreneur, and a product manager. So kind of applying all that now to my investment thesis in gaming as also like a lifelong gamer.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'll start there with some of the topics that you brought up. I know, again, I learned so much from talking to industry veterans like yourself and lifelong gamers. And I know there's a lot of jargon around some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. So maybe we'll get that out of the way first. Could you give in your, layman's terms or terms that any, average gamer would be able to understand some of the things that you said? First of all, blockchain, Web3 are two terms that might come up during this conversation that we could get out of the way and kind of explain.
For sure, absolutely, yeah. So Web3 means a variety of different things to different people, but for us, we really think of it as this next generation of the internet that is built upon a technology, the blockchain, right? And the blockchain is essentially a open ledger. It's a backend that anyone can access, read, and write to. And what that means is you can kind of disintermediate. You can not rely on a trusted third party when you can rely on this trusted source of information, which is the blockchain, which we all know how it operates, we know how it works. And so for things like owning a skin, rather than relying on Activision and their servers to tell me, yes, you own this skin, we can instead look to the blockchain and say, yes, everyone understands that you own this skin, and therefore you can use it in any game that kind of will respect that ownership claim. So that's the blockchain, and then that's the Web3 as well angle.
Okay. And then also on those other terms that we mentioned in relation to gaming, obviously, for something like AI and how it relates to what you do with Decasonic, give it a short definition there if you could.
Definitely. So in particular, we're looking a lot at generative AI. So that's a type of model these days that uses pretty advanced machine learning to generate text, images, different assets, right? And so we're investing in a variety of tools across the gaming industry, as well as games themselves, that use generative AI to either make the game creation process better, or to create new game mechanics, or to create character NPC personalities. So there's a variety of ways that we use AI in gaming today. I think it's actually kind of a shining moment for gaming, because this technology is just so applicable to the gaming industry. And I think gamers around the world within the next 2 to 3 years are going to have games that and kind of fun elements that previously just weren't possible for. It's going to be kind of a revolution thanks to AI.
So yeah, I guess all these things kind of come together into what you call Web3, right? Is that fair to say?
Exactly. So at a highest level, the original web was kind of static web browsers, HTTPS was, kind of these first standards. And that was basically just what they call like read capabilities. People could put up static web pages and you could read to it. Then there was this Web 2 was characterized by the ability to kind of write. That's Facebook and posting and sharing. And that was kind of like when the average person started to kind of like actually be on the internet and start to write to the internet and be active participants in it rather than just kind of reading what companies have put out there. And this next generation of Web3, is this ownership layer of saying, okay, now we have the blockchain to tell us who owns what. And we don't need to trust anyone else's verification. And that means we can really start to own the internet and things on it in different ways that weren't really possible. So I think, the blockchain is really foundational to that ownership layer. And I think more and more, the AI is part of this kind of generative, creating the things that end up being owned and discussed and talked about on the internet. And they together comprise Web3.
Cool. That's a good breakdown. I definitely appreciate that as someone who's, I'm coming more of like a novice gamer, not someone who's too tech savvy, like CMS, WordPress, like things any content writer, journalist, project manager, website project manager works on. So some of these other tools and softwares are a little bit more obscure to me, but I'm like, obviously these conversations help tons. But where does your company Decasonic come in, kind of merging all these new technologies with gaming specifically?
Yeah, great question. So our general partner, kind of the manager of the fund, Paul Su, he was part of the executive team that took Zynga public. And Zynga is a big casual mobile game publisher around the world. So he really knows what it is to make games into good businesses. And it's actually a key part of the ecosystem. I've come to realize now as an investor is, you really can't make these amazing world-class games that players get behind unless they're profitable, right? It needs to be a win-win. And so when these companies can make more money, they can make better and bigger experiences for us all. So, what we look to do is, invest in these technologies when they're early stage. So when a company is just an idea or has a kind of the first inkling of a prototype to kind of prove to us that they're capable of building it, that's where we'll start to invest and kind of give our expertise, both as like business operators and then also with our kind of like knowledge of the technologies to say, okay, we love your idea. Here's best how to either use blockchain or AI to create a business that can ultimately propel you to make games that reach millions of people.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess going with that idea and Decasonic and investing in new ventures and new games, are there anything that you've worked on or invested in or going to invest in that you could talk to and kind of give some real life examples for the audience?
Definitely. So we have 2 unannounced deals I'd love to talk to you about, and I'm sure we'll follow up soon. But one of them, I can't name it by name, but one of them is in the generative AI space for game assets. So essentially describe what you're looking for. And then in seconds, this can create a potion or a magic wand. And you can take this file, this image, and put it directly into your game. So whereas before you needed entire art teams, directors of art and studios to create all the things that went into the game, now you can just use a simple tool to generate any type asset you want.
Wow.
And they're kind of building that out from 2D assets to 3D assets to eventually the point where you can just say, hey, create a room with 4 windows, a door, this type table, and generate, and they'll spin something up just like that, a fully 3D model. So you just take the process of game design and you make it just 10x faster, right? And so you'll always need this artist to kind of put the polish on it and make sure the table has 4 legs rather than 5, right? There are still some kinks to be worked out. But that's a really innovative company. And the second thing they do, just talk on this level, is that a lot of artists are worried, oh, this is going to steal our jobs, it's going to steal our art. But using the blockchain, what this company is able to do is create databases. And anytime that you create an asset, let's say a magic wand, based on the training set of images that come from a certain artist, you can give that artist credit and pay them every time that asset is used, right? That's the beautiful thing about the blockchain, because everyone knows what's owned. It's kind of publicly available. everyone can cite back and say, oh yes, this art style is unique to this artist, and we can give you credit every time somebody creates a new generated image that's based on the original. So I think that's a really cool like confluence of both blockchain and AI and gaming.
Yeah, I think the idea, like the purest idea of things not being like being someone's, own, this is my art or this is what I created, like it's nice, but at the same time, like anyone that's been in art or development knows that anything good is probably copied a little bit, at least like a little piece of this, a little piece of that, that's kind of how these things move forward and get better, whether it's art, website development, software development, things like that. So I see both sides for sure, but I think it's a cool thing for someone like me to hear that, because never would I have thought I could create, a room in a game, like you said, or a special wand if I'm playing Harry Potter game or something like that. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. And it really democratizes like these creator tools, right? Instead of having to, spend years and years to learn Photoshop, you can spend minutes to kind of create the same effect today. And I think that's just going to make actually going to unleash a lot of creativity and make it so that anyone can really create the games, everyone can kind of participate. I think more and more games will have abilities for the average person to be a modder and to be a creator. And so you take a game kind of like Fortnite and you say, hey, go out and kind of create any mods you want. And like, we're going to help you create game modes. And if you create a game mode that's, really fun and engaging, we'll pay you for the kind of more traffic you bring. Right. Cool. And so I think it'll be a great thing. These tools will really enable kind of like a new wave of like collaboration and different type of game creation.
Yeah, I think I talked about this briefly in one of the interviews I did with a guy named Mark Long, and he was talking about a game that he's helping to create called Shrapnel, which is like a first-person shooter type thing, and he plans to have all of these capabilities available for like the game's players. So I'm assuming it's kind of what you're talking about, but like just within his ecosystem of that game. But the company that you're talking about, that you're investing in, is probably like a third party that would offer this service to other games, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So super familiar with Mark Long and Shrapnel. I think it's going to be kind of the first AAA game that has like true kind of like Web3 mechanics, so Sweet. Player ownership, NFT trading, it's kind of a bad word, but really like kind of digital asset trading. So you buy this game, you can resell it, you can give it to your friends, et cetera, like that. Yeah, Mark's a great guy. And I'm sure as a savvy developer, like he's using this tool. And like I said, which can name it, there's a variety of them out there, but I think this one's really like a market leader. And cool. And he would be using this tool exactly.
Nice. Any other ventures worth talking about with Decasonic that either if you can name or can't?
Yeah, there's a variety. So one other investment we just made was in this longtime game creator. He's made 3 of like the biggest first person shooter titles really in the world, and he's coming out with a 4th one, and we're really excited to back him. I think he's kind of a legendary game designer, and this is going to take the principles of a game that looks a little bit like Grand Theft Auto, where there's a ever permanent map, and there are kind of macro forces that are constantly affecting the map. There are clans, and there are kind of like you go to certain points on the map to kind of join quests to do, for instance, like a race car or a team deathmatch, or et cetera. So it's this kind of ever-present world that you can hop into. You can kind of constantly craft, battle, upgrade, steal other people's loots. There will be kind of like lots of land that clans will own and build fortresses, kind of create death traps and prevent looters. Wow. And imagine like Sea of Thieves meets Grand Theft Auto, and like kind of a really fun first-person shooter dynamic. So that's another investment we've just made. That's a game that'll probably take 2 to 3 years to launch. That's the key thing about investing in games, is that oftentimes it's really hits driven, and you don't know how good the business is until the game launches, and you kind of know, well, does the world like this game or not? So they're risky bets, they're long bets, and so that's why oftentimes we look to invest in founders that have 2 or 3 different game titles under their belts, because those are the people that they know how to execute and create a game. It doesn't necessarily mean the game will be a huge hit, but you do know at least that they're going to get it to market. They'll know the best practices for core loops and engaging audiences. So that's a big one. And I'm kind of always in the hunt for different types of models in gaming. We've made 2 investments in the last 6 months, and I think many more come soon.
Awesome. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a little bit of like how movies are, kind of created and starting them all the way to like hoping what the box office sales will be, and then the after effect of that. Is it a classic? Is it just something that's going to get initial 1 year play time and then it's falls by the wayside? So I guess how is that process, and how do you vet it? Like, is it a lot like these movies, like apparently Barbie spent 150 million on marketing, like did they, like, I know that's just like the most recent example, and obviously I think it did pretty well and people were excited about it, but how do you kind of predict that for the investments that you're making?
Yeah, again, really good question. It's no simple science really to figure out what games will be hits, right? That's a little bit of like this X factor, art more than science. But I think we've seen like with Cyberpunk 2077, that was a huge flop, just despite all the marketing that went into it, right?
Yep.
It was just kind of, the game was announced early. We can look back in time and point after time and time again different kind of flops that were very well marketed. So it's not always the marketing, although I think is a key part. I really think it's kind of the core loop, knowing your audience, executing on the vision that you lay out. I think a lot of the time where expectations fall flat is when you don't deliver on what was promised, right? And so that was really where a lot of games go wrong, when they say, hey, look at this beautiful game, look at this cutscene, you're kind of promised this beautiful AAA experience, and then it's buggy on launch, or it has half the features that you said it would. So oftentimes what we look for is founders that ship early and often, right? I think there's kind of no upper limit on how much customer feedback you can get. So with our most recent investment, they've been in development for only 3 months, and they already have a playable prototype. So I was able to kind of log in, WASD, move around, jump, understand what the art style feels like. And it's like, wow, I'm already getting kind of a taste of that magic. And then I think the other key part is like investing in a team, right? You just seen somebody who's done it once or twice before, and you're like, wow, this is somebody I can get behind, right? And
Nice.
they know that that's where like expertise really, I think in gaming more than other industries, it really pays to kind of have been around the block more than once.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, just as you say that, if you ever need gamers to test these games, definitely reach out, because we've got a lot of writers and longtime gamers who are always chomping at the bit to try new games and get that like pre-release and write an article and do all that. They love that. So just
absolutely. I will 100% keep you posted on that, because as a game studio too, you're looking for people who are like kind of seasoned gamers, and it's actually not as easy to find to get feedback you can trust. So I will 100% let you know.
Cool. I guess circling back to some of like the initial topics that we were emailing about before this, I feel like you have an interesting perspective, because you're also on the investing side, and you're on like kind of the M&A, mergers and acquisitions side, so to speak. And as that relates to gaming news that like our gamers will see, one of the things we talked about was Microsoft announcing they will acquire a certain publisher, or it was there were a couple different news bits. So I guess that's part of the question too. What to you is big news right now in the gaming industry, and how do you think that applies to like the average gamer, and how do they kind of decipher what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, again, big question there, but I think just some big headlines I'm watching recently. are obviously, so you mentioned it, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. So
Okay,
that's a
that was it.
huge acquisition in the gaming world. I think, what I'm looking at there is that what they're the SEC, sorry, and a variety of other kind of anti-monopolistic regulatory bodies are saying, wow, if Microsoft starts to own the world's second largest publisher, they'll have a huge monopoly. It'll be unfair to Sony. And then in these court cases, I think what's more interesting than the acquisition itself is kind of like what's come out in the court when they prove that this won't be a monopoly. And I thought what was fascinating is that Call of Duty actually represents 30% of all the gameplay on PlayStation, right?
Yeah,
so that's why they're
that's
worried
interesting.
about Microsoft owning Activision Blizzard is because they're worried that they'll take Call of Duty off of the PlayStation. That was their
Sure.
biggest thing. But
Yeah.
Microsoft has basically made a lot of public promises saying that they won't, and that they'll be quite, they won't be restrictive in terms of what's allowed on Sony versus what will be an Xbox exclusive. So I think as it comes to gamers, I think it won't have a ton of impact. I think the most likely impact I see today is that the Xbox Game Pass, the $5 a month pass, all access pass to the Xbox Studio games, will just get that much sweeter. I think it'll include all of the Blizzard Activision games at a sweet price. I think that'll be a true unlock, and that'll both carry through to Xbox and PC. But all in all, I think the other big news that came out of that acquisition was that Xbox has essentially publicly admitted at this point that they've lost the console wars. And as somebody who grew up with an Xbox, I was disappointed because I always thought it was the superior console and controller. But they've basically given up and they're looking to pivot. So I think that's why they're kind of acquiring Activision Blizzard. They're looking to start to kind of move more into the game development and the game publishing realm rather than like having to compete strictly on the console wars. So that was big news. I'd say other big news that I'm looking at is that Valve recently announced that they'd be banning games that was using generative AI art that it couldn't attribute. Yeah, so that'll be fascinating. I think it's a huge role for our portfolio company to step in and say, hey, we are protecting artists' rights and their exclusive IP and artistic style while also enabling people to use these generative AI tools. So that was another big one. I'd say kind of week by week, I'm always kind of having to stay in the know. It's a huge part of being successful in this job is that at any moment, these kind of big announcements, these big headlines can either make for incredible investment opportunities or can really change the opportunity that you thought it was, and overnight it might be gone. So constantly looking at that. Those are probably the big two things in my mind right now.
Yeah, I just pulled up one of my notes and I saw that, to your point, Microsoft and Sony reached a deal to keep Call of Duty on Sony's PlayStation for at least 10 years. So for anyone that was worried about that, obviously for the next 10 years, it's good. But I guess that just also means that Microsoft is going to be working with Activision Blizzard, right? That's the one they acquired, is going to be working with them to have new games that don't have anything to do with or won't be available on these other consoles.
Yeah, very likely. I think that's highly likely. And one other big announcement too in the acquisition space was Take-Two Interactive just announced that they would be acquiring Zynga for $11 billion. So that's another big merger. Still needs to be kind of approved, but I think that will go through. I think they're kind of not at quite the scale of Microsoft and Activision. So again, we're seeing, in the first 3 quarters of last year alone, the value of the acquisitions in the sector totaled over $35 billion. So it's a big period for M&A right now. And overall, I think it'll make for better gaming experiences. I think when you have that much talent in one room, you oftentimes end up making very marquee titles. And I think it'll be good for the ecosystem, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.